So there have been some concerns raised about the Township of Amaranth's proposed flag protocol and proclamation policy that was supposed to be introduced on the July 2nd regular town council meeting, but will now be introduced at the next regular town council meeting that is scheduled for July 15th. Posts on social media would indicate that Deputy Mayor Garrett is one of these people that has concerns with how the policy was drafted. And after looking at it myself, I could see how people would have concerns. So I did a deep dive into it further to figure out if there was actually real concerns with how this protocol and policy was drafted. And to take a look, we'll go into it deeper right now. So this is the notice of motion that was going to be introduced at the last town council meeting by Councillor Tijssen and Councillor Foster. But again, this will be introduced at the next one, which is scheduled for July 15th. Now, what this says is that whereas the Township of Amaranth is a diverse community, and whereas the Township of Amaranth is a community that celebrates, I guess there's a typo there, is a community that celebrates diversity and achievement, and whereas the public display of flags is a visible and significant means by which diversity and achievement can be celebrated. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Township of Amaranth hereby dedicate one flagpole to the promotion of celebrations, causes, and concerns of importance to our residents. And just to note that they actually do already have this flagpole, it's just not extended right now, but they do have a fourth flagpole that they can use for this, so it costs no additional money to the taxpayers. So continuing on, and furthermore, that the CAO of the Township of Amaranth shall develop and implement a protocol to establish the order, precedence, and duration of flags to be flown in keeping with international, national, provincial, and municipal guidelines, recognitions, and priorities. So this is where it states pretty clearly that the CAO is the one that develops this protocol. Not Councillor Tijssen, not Councillor Foster, not Mayor Currie, not anybody on the council, but the CAO, which is the Chief Administrative Officer. So continuing on. Of note, all flags to be flown shall be provided at no charge to the Township of Amaranth, along with any special considerations for display or safekeeping. So this, again, shows that there is no cost to the Township beyond people's time in raising these flags and doing these proclamations. But again, mostly just the flag is what this notice of motion concerns itself with. So, where practical or possible, a written description of the flag and its significance shall be provided to the CAO for publication on the Town of Amaranth website for the period that the flag is on display. Now, going into the flag protocol and proclamation policy itself, that was drafted by the CAO of the Township of Amaranth. Now, the objective of this is that proclamations provide a means for council to promote public awareness campaigns, charitable fundraising campaigns, arts and cultural celebrations of significance to the Township of Amaranth. Proclamations may also acknowledge special honors for individuals and organizations of the Township of Amaranth in recognition of a special achievement. Accordingly, it is important that Council's endorsement of proclamations is based on a framework that ensures all requests are dealt with consistently. All of that sounds great, but again, it's all about how it's implemented. So the purpose of this policy is to establish the framework for the Council's endorsement of proclamations. This turns out to, when you start looking at other regions' flag protocols and proclamation policies, this varies. Sometimes it's the council's endorsement, sometimes it's the mayor's endorsement, sometimes it's the town's endorsement, but regardless, this all makes sense. So you go into the scope. This policy applies to all requests for proclamations received by the Township of Amaranth. That makes perfect sense. I mean, obviously. So again, everything so far seems pretty standard. CAO/clerk, we won't get into this. We'll get into what a flag raising is, which is for proposal of this policy shall mean the raising of a flag in conjunction with a proclamation that has been endorsed by council. That's why you have to put in the proclamation policy, because it goes with the flag raising policies. So makes sense. So a proclamation shall mean a public or official announcement, particularly one dealing with a matter of great importance that may be endorsed by council of the Township of Amaranth and may be recognized on a particular day, week, or month. And then a regular council meeting shall mean a scheduled meeting held at a regular interval in accordance with the approved calendar or schedule of meetings and the town's procedural bylaw. So again, this makes sure that it goes with the regular council meetings, that there's not going to be a special meeting that's brought forward to this. You just can't be setting precedents, because it's like, why do you have a special council meeting for that cause but not mine? Again, this is about consistency, so having it done at regular council meetings ensures that. Again, everything so far makes sense. Nothing's out of the ordinary. But this is where you get into the real details, is this. So the proclamation criteria. And again, this is important because basically to get a flag raising, you need to have a proclamation go along with it. So we'll get into it. So it starts off with as proclamations that are of significance to the Township of Amaranth may be endorsed by the Council for the following: civic promotions, public awareness campaigns, charitable fundraising campaigns, arts and cultural celebrations, or special honors for individuals and organizations for special achievements. Only proclamations that involve participation by the Township of Amaranth or its residents will be considered for endorsement. Requirements must meet at least one of the following criteria to be considered. Now, again, this is where it gets important. Again, it has to meet at least one of these. The requesting body is a registered charity or not-for-profit organization, including arts, athletic, and cultural celebrations to help increase public awareness of their programs and activities. So this is great because I've seen some flag protocol policies restricted to organizations that are within the town limits. And that is hard to do because the Township of Amaranth is relatively small and it's going to be hard to find many organizations there. Now, the second criteria is that the request can demonstrate that the cause is of benefit to and or supports the residents of the Township of Amaranth and or related to an important event taking place in the Township or County of Dufferin. Now, I think this one would fit. I mean, again, a lot of this is subject to interpretation and how cooperative council is and the CAO, but I think this one reasonably would apply to the pride flag because we do support it in the County of Dufferin, and it is an important event. I know it's wasn't taking place in the township, but it does support the residents of the Township of Amaranth, which is, welcoming diversity into the town and just supporting diversity for everyone so they feel welcome. So I think that one's perfect. And then C, the proclamation promotes the initiatives or interests of the township, county, provincial, and federal levels of government. I think this could apply there too, but again, you start getting in murky waters there. But I still feel like it would apply. But again, it's all subject to interpretation. Now, this is where I started getting a little worried, is when I started seeing this. So, of course, you have to have criteria for council to not endorse something. But when you start looking at it again, like I said, I started getting a little concerned when I see some of this, which was the first one here, which is matters of political controversy. Which, I mean, pretty much anything can be politically controversial. Most people wouldn't think wearing a mask is politically controversial, but look what they've done in the States. I mean, it's ridiculous. But, I mean, some people think that townships shouldn't make proclamations at all. They should stay out of it. So, I mean, if you start talking about pride and things like that, then you're definitely getting into political controversy. So the second one is religious organizations or ideological or religious beliefs that contain commercial or political overtones or individual opinions. Now, again, this is all subject to interpretation, but I could see this counting against the pride flag as much as I could see the first one. And then C, individual convictions or requests related to a cause which is discriminatory. Again, this is all subject to interpretation. The fourth one is organizations or events with no direct relation to the Township of Amaranth and or do not involve participation by the Township of Amaranth or its residents. This makes sense. I mean, why would you celebrate something that has nothing to do with the town? I mean, you can't celebrate everything on the planet, and you don't want to set a precedent. If it has nothing to do with the town or the residents, then why would you get involved in it? E, celebrations, campaigns, or events contrary to townships' policies or bylaws. And I think this would be like applying to like basically a big giant, like maybe like a giant campfire in the middle of Main Street or something like that. You're not going to get them to endorse that because it's contrary to their policies and bylaws. So that's logical. That one doesn't really raise any concerns to me. And then F, the sixth one is celebrations, campaigns, or events intended for profit-making purposes. Again, that makes sense. I mean, then you're gonna have every corporation trying to get favors from council or just expecting it, and nobody needs that. And that's not what council's for. And then G, matters attempting to influence government policy. Now, I don't think that the pride flag would really apply to that, but again, everything's subject to interpretation and whether people are acting in good faith or not. That's really what it comes down to. But some of these criteria do raise flags to me. But here's the thing. I actually looked at Ottawa and Toronto, some places that we do know actually fly the flag and have been a little bit more progressive on these fronts. They have similar policies. But it turns out all the concerns I raised with the criteria for a proclamation to not be endorsed by council is standard for many other cities' proclamation and flag raising policies. So, I mean, again, I think it matters whether or not everyone's acting in good faith. But I mean, if it's the CAO and the council not making these decisions, then I can possibly see that being okay too. And that turns out to be a common thing as well, is that council doesn't actually get saddled with these decisions. They delegate the authority to somebody else working in the actual city administration. And since the township of Amaranth's a little bit smaller than a city, they are going with their CAO, which makes sense. And again, as long as they're acting in good faith, then this policy should be fine from what I can see so far. I mean, of course, changes can be made. This is just a draft. I mean, there's typos in this policy. Things could change for sure. And of course, I mean, concerns will be raised at the actual council meeting where it does get introduced. So, I mean, we shouldn't jump all over this to begin with. If people have concerns, they can raise it for the council. And I mean, the more we learn about these things now, that means we can actually get ahead of these things and request it for the council meeting. But anyways, we'll finish out the rest of the policy here. So, submitting a proclamation request. All organizations or persons submitting a request for a proclamation must complete a proclamation request form attached as Appendix A to this policy, and proclamation request forms shall be submitted to the attention of the CAO or clerk. The following limitations related to proclamation requests are noted for those submitting a request. An organization may only request one proclamation annually, and that is actually the same as in Toronto, I believe, if not Ottawa as well. And then an organization does not have exclusive rights to the day, week, or month of the proclamation, and proclamations on a similar topic will be issued on a first-come, first-served basis. This makes a lot of sense. I mean, and again, these are relatively standard conditions that they have. And if you do some research on other cities' proclamation policies, then you'll learn that these limitations are relatively standard. Now, D, multi-year proclamations or proclamations that are to be repeated indefinitely will not be considered and must be requested on an annual basis. This seems like a waste of time to me and unnecessary, but I get it. And again, this appears to be fairly standard as well. So, I mean, this seems like it's unnecessary, but then you hear about these old laws that are in place from a long time ago. And I mean, we don't want to be raising flags that no longer have any relevance just because some people are too afraid to speak out about it or to bring up the real relevance. So, I mean, I can understand that it might be safer to just do this. And I mean, if it really does matter to people, then filling out a form every year, I mean, and honestly, it's just going to be sending in the same form over and over again, just changing some dates, then this really shouldn't be a problem. Even though, again, it seems a little annoying, but it's not that big of a deal. And again, it's fairly standard. Now, here we go with proclamations with the flag raising. Proclamations that include a flag raising may be permitted provided the proclamation request is in accordance with above section titled Proclamation Criteria, and that flag raising does not conflict with rules for flying the national flag of Canada or any other flag being flown by the township of Amaranth. Flags are to be provided by the organization or person making the request and returned after proclamation. Again, this is fairly standard. There's nothing out of here that seems to be out of bounds. All of it makes sense. Now, this could be something here. I don't think it is, but we'll see. Proclamation requests will be reviewed by the CAO clerk against the eligibility criteria noted in this policy. In the event that the request does not comply with the policy, the CAO will not include the request on the council meeting agenda and will advise the mayor and organization or person submitting the request accordingly. Proclamation requests that meet all eligibility criteria will be placed on the agenda for the next regular council meeting of council, or the next regular meeting of council under the general business and correspondence section of the agenda. The township of Amaranth reserves the right at all times to remove, refuse, or deny a request as deemed necessary or appropriate by the mayor and council. Now, that one might raise a little bit of flags because, I mean, no matter how great the CAO is, this is where you start running into the mayor and the council. And I mean, we've seen issues here before. So I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, we don't want to jump to conclusions. Again, the councillors that introduced this notice of motion to have this proposal drafted was Councillor Tijssen and Councillor Foster. And although they do have a history of siding with Mayor Currie, just going from reports and past votes, they are the ones that brought this forward. Now, there does seem to be some concerns here because although a lot of responsibility it seems to be placed on the CAO and clerk, who again, we have no reason to believe they wouldn't be acting in good faith, The issue may be, though, that the final say lies with the mayor and the council. And as we've seen before, that's where the issue lies, particularly with the mayor, but also with some council members that seem to be more supportive of him and are less willing to speak out against him. So, I mean, that is something to look out for. My only criticism for this one would be that they should have to provide a written and public explanation for why they are turning down a proposal that does fit out all the criteria. Because as we've seen before, this is where the real problem lies, not with the CAO, but with the mayor in particular, but also possibly some of the members of council who generally tend to side with him no matter what he does. So, I mean, I think a written explanation as to why they would deny a request that does fit all the criteria does make a lot of sense. So that would be one of the areas for improvement I would suggest for this. But otherwise, that is really the only one I have with this, other than hoping, again, that the mayor and council are always acting in good faith. But again, I think a way to guarantee that is making sure they provide written explanations for denying requests that actually do fit all the criteria that they've laid forward. This helps guarantee consistency. So, continuing on, council endorsement of proclamation requests. Following consideration of a proclamation request by council, the CAO or clerk will advise the organization person who submitted the proclamation request form in writing of the outcome of council's consideration. Proclamations that have been endorsed by council will be noted on the news and public notice page of the township's website and will remain listed for a period ending on December 31st of the year in which the proclamation was endorsed. That's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's good that they're telling people that that actually did the submission. And it's good to hear that they actually are stating that it doesn't have to be an outright organization. It can just be a person. I think they'd prefer an organization. And that's how a lot of cities actually enact this policy, and that the organization has to be located within city limits. But again, Amaranth Township is relatively small. There's not many organizations based there. So, I mean, it's good that they are being flexible with this one. So credit to the CAO for making sure that this was an accessible policy from what we can see so far. Again, nothing I've seen is out of bounds with any other policy. There are a couple things that could be added, but I've looked at Toronto and Ottawa, and all of everything that's here in the Township of Amaranth's proposed policy for proclamations and flag raisings seems pretty in line. There's a last part here about the national flag rules. I don't need to go into it, but there's nothing here that's out of line. I mean, what I would suggest is that they actually put a request form like the City of Toronto did. What they have here is the flag raising request form, and they also have a proclamation request form where you have the date of the proclamation required, the date of the proclamation, organization name, because again, they make sure that everyone has all these are corresponding to an organization, whereas Amaranth does allow personal requests. But here, yeah, I'm not going to get too deep into this form or this other form, but the point is they have electronic forms, and it's not that hard to put this stuff together. With the flag raising form, they make you bring out an actual picture of the flag, which is great just to show you have proof that you actually have it and that you have everything ready to go. So usually with this policy is what they do is make people turn in the flag a week before the event takes place, which makes sense just to make sure that everything's in line and that there's no last minute rushing and that you don't have to cancel the actual proclamation because the flag wasn't there. Just make sure it's organized and make sure everything to go. And another thing with this policy, and that's relatively standard, is that it's about 3 to 4 weeks in advance that you have to submit the request for a proclamation and a flag raising. Again, all of that makes sense to make sure that everything's in line and organized and not rushed. Because again, it's supposed to be an official proclamation. You want council to do a good job, the mayor to do a good job. You don't want to give anybody any excuses to do a bad job. So, I mean, it's on the responsibility of the citizens to not give them any excuses, which means making sure that we just follow the rules. I mean, a month in advance isn't too much to ask. I think that's pretty relatively reasonable. And again, it's in line with other municipalities' proclamations and flag protocols. So I don't see any real complaints here so far. I've reached out to Deputy Mayor Currie to see if he had any concerns with it, because I heard that he possibly did through a Facebook post. But I'm not seeing anything here that's out of line. Like, here's the Township of Amaranth's proclamation request form, organization name. That's not necessary from what I understand, unless something changes. But that's the contact name, the address, phone, email. Proclamation requested. Dates of the proclamation. Again, all this makes sense. Purpose of the proclamation: civic promotions, public awareness campaigns. I think this would possibly be for Pride, public awareness campaign, and art and cultural celebrations, but maybe even civic promotions. But anyways, here you provide a description of your organization. Again, from what I understand, you don't have to have an organization. And then ask if you've issued if you've requested a similar proclamation before, and then put in the previous date, the request, and then the draft wording for a proclamation. You have to include that for the council consideration in order to receive an official signed proclamation from the mayor, and the proclamation flag to be supplied by the requester. Here's you need to provide a photo if it's applicable, and then this office use stuff. But yeah, like this, nothing here seems out of line. The organization thing is a little confusing. It's a little misleading if you actually do have to be part of an organization. But again, from what I saw, you only that wasn't an actual requirement. You only have to fit one of these requirements, and like it doesn't have to be an organization. It doesn't state that, at least. So, they should either be more clear with the wording of this and make sure that it's all requests have to be from actual organizations. And if that's the case, that's going to make things a little bit harder. But I don't think it makes it impossible. Again, they never stated that the organizations have to be located within city limits. So, this does make it accessible. There are outside organizations that could request the raising of a pride flag. It's just going to make it a little bit harder for residents, possibly. But who knows? I could be complicating things. This could be a lot easier to do this than what I'm thinking. But anyways, anything I'm seeing here isn't out of line with what I've seen with, again, the Toronto and Ottawa flag raisings. And they've been more progressive on this front than other places. So I think they're a good example to follow. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that's where a lot of this came from. If I was going to be doing this job and many others, I know I wouldn't be paying a lawyer to come up with something that I know is already out there. And I'm going to look at Ottawa and Toronto because they've done it right. Particularly Ottawa now because they've had certain issues with flag raisings in the recent past, so they've revised their policy. So it's more modernized. That is something I will get into, actually, is there are some things they could add to this. Now, one thing I would add to the policy, which is from the Ottawa proclamation policy, is that it should be specified proclamations can be issued that correspond with relevant days of awareness, celebration, importance, commemoration, or promotion as recognized by the Ontario provincial government and or the Canadian federal government or a ministry or department thereof. So, that would apply to the pride flag. That is recognized by the Ontario and the federal government. And, that covers it. That just pretty much solves all the problems there. If they specified this outright, then I think that gets rid of a lot of the issues. So, that is one suggestion I would have. But really, that isn't in the Toronto's policy, and they have a pride flag. Obviously, a policy doesn't have to include that statement, again, but it does make it easier and make it a little bit more straightforward for what can be accepted. So I think it's worthwhile to include. Again, what this would be is that you could issue proclamations that correspond with relevant days of awareness, celebration, importance, commemoration, or promotion as recognized by the Ontario provincial government and or the Canadian federal government or a ministry or department thereof. So again, makes a ton of sense. So anyways, to summarize, nothing in that proposed protocol and policy for flag raisings and proclamations seems out of line. Again, there's a little things that could be added, but they're not necessary. Although I do think it is worthwhile. But anyways, we'll see what actually happens on the next town council meeting, which is July 15th, and we'll see what happens then. See if there's any changes to the proposal, and if it actually gets the required votes. And we'll see then. Also, that is when they will be reading out letters from the public. about Mayor Currie's comments. This is the first regular council meeting that has actually taken place since he's made his comments. So, and last time I checked, there was quite a few letters that were included, and not many of them were from residents of Amaranth, but many of them were against Mayor Currie's comments, although there were quite a few that were in support. But regardless, anyone that I could identify from Amaranth was against his comments, which is great to see. But anyways, until next time, have a great one, and thanks for listening to Duffer News. Thanks.